The United States is split into states. These states are then split into counties. These are known as subdivisions. Subdivisions specifically are in levels or degrees. So states would be the first degree of subdivisions since they are the first way the country is divided. Next, counties are the second degree because they divide the first degree states. But how about the third degree? Is there anything in the US dividing up the counties? Well, yes, the US Census Bureau does indeed divide counties into further subdivisions. But this situation is very complicated. And there are 30 different types of county subdivisions and places across the United States. So this brings in this map I made. This shows each county subdivision and place as a separate color, so you can see this complicated situation. But before we cover each type of division on this chart, let's begin by defining some terms. The 20 states that can be seen as primarily light green on the map, so in the west and southeast, use what are known as Census County Divisions, or CCDs. These census county divisions are the only county divisions used within these light green states. Everything else is places, which we will dive more into later. But these CCDs were usually established in states where populations in rural areas were very small. So it would be impractical for an actual government to be established. Because of this, these CCDs have no government, and instead the land is governed by the county. This is in contrast to the other 29 states, which use what are known as minor civil divisions, or MCDs. These states have a much larger variety of colors than the CCD states because there are many different types of county divisions. And in these MCD states, many of these county divisions have their own government. A very common type of MCD that you'll see on this map are townships, which are the light blue. And we will cover exactly what these mean in the next section. But these are the two types of states that can be on this map, CCDs and MCD states. So now let's begin investigating each unique county division and place. While I have already covered a bit about CCDs, they are still very interesting and have more to them. CCDs were established in the 1950s decennial census, with Washington using them first. By the 1960s, 19 more states were using census county divisions, and in the 1990s, Nevada adopted CCDs, bringing the number up to 21 states. Finally, in the 2010 census, Tennessee switched back to minor civil divisions, which has left us with the 20 CCD states of today. Now, even though these CCDs are only used for the census, and I doubt many people have even heard of them, they do not divide the counties up randomly. There are 4 parameters for the creation of CCDs. Number 1, they have to have a community orientation, so they should be centered around one or multiple local communities. Number 2, they should have visible, stable boundaries, which usually follow rivers, roads, county lines, etc. Number 3, they should conform to groupings of existing statistical subdivisions, which are known as census tracts or block numbering areas. These census tracts or block numbering areas, I do not have time to dive deep into, but they are essentially areas that the census used to gather their data. And number 4, they should have a recognizable name. Even though I doubt the people living in these states know what CCD they live in, having a recognizable name helps the Census Bureau so it's not cluttered full of CCD number 1 or CCD number 512. But now let's move into the actual MCDs on this map. Alaska is a bit odd. For one, they do not have regular counties. Instead, they have their own boroughs or census areas. Boroughs are for the places that are a bit more populated, and they essentially have a county government, whereas census areas are for the not-so-populated areas. Because of Alaska's strange situation, they also have a unique county division known as Census Subareas, or CSAs. As you can see, I put these CSAs as a darker green on this map, and this is actually for a good reason. They are MCDs, but they act very similar to CCDs, in that they have no government and are only used for statistical purposes. Next up, we have civil townships. Civil townships are by far the most common MCD you will find on this map. They are the primary county division found in 17 states. Much like what you'll see with many of the places later, their exact definition varies between states. But one trend is that they are less governmental than cities or other incorporated places. While they do have a town hall and manage their own roads and other infrastructure, municipal services such as fire, police, or hospitals are provided by the county. But again, it varies. In Iowa, the civil townships have basically no government function, whereas the townships in New Jersey are essentially incorporated places. But unlike the CCDs and census sub-areas, these townships are definitely more well-known, and they have more of a governmental purpose. Next up, we have New England towns. Their official name is just towns, but I added New England to differentiate them between the other town category on this map. New England towns function as basically the cities or villages of other states. They are legally incorporated, although weirdly they're not considered incorporated by the Census Bureau, and they have full governmental functions, including their own police and fire. Now, something interesting about New England is that their counties are basically not used. So instead, these towns and their cities are much more important governments than their county governments. This difference of towns and cities being more important than counties dates back to the 16 to 1700s when the original towns were established. And there wasn't really one dominant county seat in the area that acted as the central market or infrastructure. Next up, we have charter townships. Charter townships are MCDs found only in Michigan. They can be thought of as essentially more municipal townships. They can establish their own police and fire, and they are what are known as home rule, which means it is governed by its own citizens and can make its own laws or charters, hence its name. These charter townships were created in 1947 as a way to protect townships from being annexed by cities. They have a population requirement of more than 2,000 residents, which is why you'll see them surrounding cities. The next 5 divisions on the chart are all very similar in their function and are used in southern states. These all have no governments, but do vary slightly in their abilities. Magisterial districts are used in Virginia and West Virginia. They conduct elections and record land ownership. Election districts are used in Maryland. They exist only to conduct elections and for census purposes, of course. Supervisors districts are used in Mississippi. They elect county supervisors. Parish governing authority districts are used in Louisiana, and they also just elect county officials. Finally, county commissioner districts are used in Tennessee. They elect county commissioners. And fun fact about these county commissioner districts, they were established in 2010, and I had no idea they existed until a few days ago. And so I had to reformat my entire chart because I had to add the legend entry. So that was very fun, but now my map is more accurate, so I guess there's that. Next we have election precincts. Election precincts are used in some counties of Illinois and Nebraska. And unlike the civil townships in those states, they do not have governments and are only used for conducting elections. So they are very similar to the 5 previous MCDs that we just covered. Next we have another common MCD used in 8 states. These are unorganized territories. Unorganized territories are essentially the MCD equivalent to CCDs. They were established in the 1970s for places where the population isn't sufficient enough for government. As such, you will see them in not-so-populated areas like northern Minnesota or Maine. They can also be used in places such as military bases. For example, Camp Atterbury in Indiana. These unorganized territories have no governments and are used only for statistical purposes. Next, we have American Indian Reservations. These are MCDs found only in Maine and New York. But hold on a minute, aren't reservations found all over the US? Well, yes. Reservations are found in many states all across the US, but only in Maine and New York do they have their own separate county divisions. American Indian reservations have their own tribal government in these states, but there isn't a specific MCD government like in a township or a city. The next 5 MCDs are all very similar and are all found in New England states. They all have no government and basically serve the same purpose as unorganized territory. The only difference is their history. Gores are found in Maine and Vermont. They are areas where there was a survey error. These land survey errors usually showed that multiple people or towns owned one area of land. And so instead, gores were established to resolve the conflict. Today, only 4 gores exist, 3 in Vermont and 1 in Maine. Grants are found in New Hampshire and Vermont. There are 9 of them in total, and they are areas where the government gave out land grants to specific owners. There are 6 purchases found only in New Hampshire, and as the name would suggest, they are areas where owners purchase the land. There are also 6 survey townships, which are all found in Coos County, New Hampshire. They are simply areas divided for census purposes. And finally, there are 4 locations in New Hampshire, and I'm pretty sure these have no unique history, and were basically just leftover land that had to be defined by the Census Bureau. But I think that these New England specific MCDs are pretty interesting because they show different history of the land in the area. And they really just show how New England treats their land differently than other places in the US. Next up, we have plantations. Plantations are specific to Maine. They essentially act as an in-between population of unorganized territories and towns. They do have their own government, but this government is a bit more limited than regular town or city governments. Currently, there are 29 plantations, but the numbers have decreased from the past due to some upgrading into town status. The next MCD is strange, but it is very easy to explain. Unorganized water. It is just water. So obviously it has no government and only exists to divide up the remaining area of counties that extend out into the ocean or the Great Lakes. And finally, we have possibly the strangest MCD on this map, a pseudo-MCD, or a pseudo-county subdivision. There are only 2 of them, one which is Cleveland County in North Carolina, and another which is Arlington County in Virginia. Both of these counties decided to abolish their county subdivisions. So the Census Bureau just defined the entire county as one pseudo-MCD, which is a non-governmental subdivision, only used for census purposes. But it seems very strange to me that a county such as Cleveland County can just abolish their townships and be left with this strange pseudo-MCD. But now we move into the next section of our chart. And these are places. The US Census Bureau defines a place as a concentration of population which has a name, is locally recognized, and is not part of any other place. Except for one instance, which we will cover later, these places are incorporated, which means that they have their own government and their own powers. Before we cover the specific places, we first have to learn about a concept. That being dependency. The places on this chart can either be dependent or independent. Dependent places are what you'll find in all the CCD states and some places in MCD states. They are dependent on the county division. This means that the city essentially sits on top one or multiple county divisions, and the place does not comprise its own division. In contrast, an independent place does create its own county division. While the topic of this video is county subdivisions, all places, even dependent ones, must be mentioned. I mean, who is going to say they live in East Seattle CCD when they actually live in the city of Bellevue, Washington? But because I included places on this map, some CCDs and other MCDs will be covered by the dependent places. So the first place on this map, and by far the most common place, are cities. They are found in 49 states and DC. But wait, that means that there is a state without any cities? Surprisingly, yes. Hawaii, according to the Census Bureau, does not actually have any incorporated places. But we will cover that later. The exact parameters for cities to exist vary per state, but they always represent populous places with governments. In some states, such as Minnesota, every single incorporated place is a city. But in other states, there are other incorporated places that are defined, such as villages or towns. These cities mostly act as independent in MCD states and dependent in CCD states. Although, much like almost everything on this map, there are complexities in MCD states. Next, we have consolidated city-counties, or simply city-counties. These are when cities and counties merge into one jurisdiction. The cities and counties will also have one unified government, with a city council that also acts as a county board, and a county chief who is also the mayor. It is important to note that both the city and county still exist. They are just merged into one unit. This means that you can visit San Francisco County along with visiting San Francisco City. Consolidated city-counties have varying names per state. Since Alaska calls their counties boroughs, they are called consolidated city boroughs there. And in Georgia, some city-counties are called unified governments instead. A final interesting thing about consolidated city-counties is the fact that in CCD states, despite taking up the entire area of the county, they are still dependent because, as I mentioned previously, CCDs are the only county division within those states. County balances are found within 7 states and almost act exactly the same as consolidated city-counties. The only difference is that the city doesn't encompass the entire county. There are still other incorporated places that exist within the county. An example is Indianapolis. While Indianapolis and Marion County are one entity, some cities and towns still exist within Marion County and have some limited municipal powers. And much like consolidated city-counties, the same dependency rules apply. Next, we have another place that is very similar to city-counties, that being independent cities. The difference here is that the county does not exist whatsoever. The city acts as both a county equivalent and a county subdivision, or a place. They are found in 4 states. Virginia has 38 independent cities, and then Baltimore, Maryland, St. Louis, Missouri, and Carson City, Nevada are the other independent cities. Virginia has used independent cities since 1871. The reason they established independent cities was to give cities more control and have them not be managed by a county in any way. Interestingly, some independent cities in Virginia can act as the county seat for other counties around it, despite not being a part of a county. So it is a pretty confusing situation. Also, the same CCD rules applies for Carson City, Nevada. Despite the county not even existing, the Census Bureau still designates Carson City as a single CCD. But moving out of cities, we have towns. Towns are found in 31 states, and much like cities, they vary per state. But one consistency is that they almost always represent incorporated places of less population than cities. These towns will have their own governments and municipal functions, and the dependency of these towns varies per state. Villages are found in 16 states, and much like towns, they represent incorporated areas of less population than cities. Some states, such as New Mexico, have cities, towns, and villages. And in the case of New Mexico, villages represent the smallest incorporated place. The dependency of villages also varies per state. Next we have boroughs, and these boroughs shouldn't be confused with Alaskan boroughs. Boroughs are found in 4 states, and you guessed it, vary per state. They have their own municipal government and have less population than cities. Except the situation in New York City is much more complicated, and I will cover this in its own section. But those boroughs are unique when compared to the boroughs of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. Home rule municipalities are only found in Pennsylvania, and they are only independent places, which means that they are their own county subdivision. These home rule municipalities operate under a unique charter which gives them home rule, so they can make their own laws, and they have a bit more power. Currently in Pennsylvania, there are 6 home rule municipalities which surround Pittsburgh. Next, we have a very strange place. There is one corporation in the entire US, and that is Ranson, West Virginia. It literally has the same functionality as any city in West Virginia. The only difference is that it was founded by a corporation, specifically the Charlestown Mining, Manufacturing, and Improvement Company. This corporation was incorporated in 1910. And it is a dependent place. Finally, we have made it to the last entry on our chart, that being Census Designated Places, or CDPs. CDPs are pretty interesting. They are found in every state, and in every state, CDPs do not act as a county division, and are instead purely a dependent place. What makes them unique is that they occupy unincorporated places instead of incorporated places. Because of this, their boundaries are often loosely defined and make up just a rough area of population. Not every unincorporated place in the US is a CDP. It is just the places that have a significant enough population and a recognizable name to locals that gets this special designation. CDPs have no government because they are unincorporated, and they really only serve statistical purposes for the census. Even so, some CDPs are extremely populated. Columbia, Maryland has a population of 104,000 residents, but has never incorporated, because it is essentially governed by a large HOA. And because it has never incorporated, it is a CDP instead. Also, every single place in Hawaii is an unincorporated CDP, including the capital of Honolulu, which makes it the only state capital to be unincorporated, and the only state capital to be anything other than a city or a consolidated city. The reason that Hawaii has no incorporated places is simply because the state government determined that the county governments were sufficient enough to govern over the population. So while CDPs seem like the most loose definition on this entire chart, they are still extremely important for the Census Bureau, and can even represent extremely populated places. Now, even though we've covered every section on this chart, there are still a few more interesting things that I want to cover. The first being New York City, because the situation there is pretty complicated. New York City is simultaneously one city and 5 boroughs. And these 5 boroughs are coextensive, which means that they're basically merged, with 5 counties. So to start, the one city of New York is simply a dependent city. It has a mayor, a city council, it governs over its own roads and municipal services, etc. On the map, I chose to not display the city, since it would be covering the boroughs or the counties. But I added a note which mentions that it's also a city. But then we have the 5 boroughs, which are also 5 different counties. These boroughs, which I simply chose to represent as the yellow borough places on this map, they are actually non-governmental MCDs. Even though the New York boroughs are counties, these counties also have barely any power. So there isn't really a perfect way to represent New York City on this map, since it has the unique situation of being a city which is larger and more important than several different counties. But I believe that representing each of the counties as one borough and adding a note explaining that it's also a city is the best way to go about it. Another place I want to touch on is Washington, D.C. D.C. is a bit less complicated than New York, but it is still similar. D.C. acts as a statistical equivalent to a state, a single county equivalent, and a single county subdivision all at the same time. For the map, I opted to represent DC as the City of Washington, because that's the MCD level. Interestingly, the Census Bureau does not define DC as a consolidated city-county. This is because of its unique situation as being all 3 subdivision levels at one time. The governance in DC is also interesting. It is governed by both the mayor and city council of the City of Washington and Congress. The city has some level of home rule, but any law it passes can be overturned by Congress. And technically, the city government could be abolished at any time by Congress. So again, the situation in DC is pretty complicated because the federal government and the city government are the 2 most important governments, whereas the county level and essentially state level are barely important at all. Finally, I want to answer one more question. What about the territories? You may notice that this map does not include the territories of the United States. These territories do have their own version of counties, such as municipios in Puerto Rico, and they are also split into their own unique MCDs, such as barrios in Puerto Rico. But I opted to not display them on the map. This is primarily because the territories are not part of any census region, which are commonly used by the Census Bureau to classify their US data. Also, the census data itself is not included within the US data, and is instead included in its own data set, named Puerto Rico and the outlying areas. Finally, and this is more of a superficial reason, but as you can see, this map was already very full, and I would not only have to include the territories themselves on the map section, but also their unique MCDs in the legend. So, to conclude this video, the United States is a very complicated country. The amount of information and YouTube videos talking about the complexities of counties alone is very large. As such, you can imagine how much information I do not know or could not include about county subdivisions in this video. I encourage you to research county subdivisions in your own state and let me know what you learned. And before we finish, the zoomable version of both maps and a link to buy a poster will be in the description and comments. No pressure, but I would greatly appreciate it. Also, this video took a ton of research, so I would also appreciate it if you subscribed. Thanks for watching.